Do you feel alone in your binge eating journey, like no one gets it? I've been there. Today, I'll show you the 5 phases I went through in my binge eating recovery journey. Phase 1 is the buildup phase. Phase 2 is the innocence phase. Phase 3 is the wake-up call. Stay till the end because phases 4 and 5 is where I'm going to show you how I got long-term results. Hey guys, it's Dr. Joss. I have healed from over a decade of binge eating, and now it is my passion to help others do the same. If you have tried everything else and nothing else has worked for you to stop binge eating, go ahead and click down below for my Kickstart to Food Control Guide. Phase 1 of my binge eating story was the buildup phase. So this is where I learned that weight is bad. This is where I desired so much acceptance and worthiness, and growing up in a hyper-controlling and manipulating environment. So one of the first places I learned that weight is bad was when I was a ballerina from age 3 to 15. And throughout that time, I would get comments about my body, about what I was eating, about what else I was doing. My body would be criticized for what it looked like. And I would be told what to eat and how to eat and just be pinched and prodded and poked. I also got comments from other people as well that were teaching me that it was something to be ashamed of, to have any sort of something that was pinchable on your body, something that was visible for someone to make a comment about. Those things were made as well, and I felt really insecure about that also. I realized that something was wrong with me. I stopped doing ballet in high school and I went into doing crew. I started gaining 10 pounds every year. I went up a whole pant size every single year. And that didn't lead to a good sense of self-esteem because I knew that I didn't fit in anywhere. I never really felt like I fit in high school. And I knew that the popular girls were all skinny. They didn't eat very much. And so I was like, okay, well, clearly that's the ticket, is that I need to be smaller, I need to be skinnier. And comments were made about other people's bodies as well, which really affected my sense of like how I made sense of the world around me and how one is accepted and how one is determined to be worthy of being recognized and seen and acknowledged. Comment down below. Where is the point in your life where you started to realize that weight is bad? And I also grew up in a hyper-controlling and manipulating environment, which led to phase 2 of my binge eating journey. Phase 2 was the innocence phase. So because I came from a home where my father was very hyper-controlling and manipulating, when I went to college, this was finally where I had control of myself and my choices and what I did. So now I had the freedom to do what I wanted. I'm in control now. This is where I started gaining a sense of control of myself and my body and my choices. And so in college, to gain acceptance and worthiness in this new environment, I was able to kind of start clean. So I started to lose weight because what I had learned in high school was that, okay, well, if I want to be popular and liked and accepted, everybody's skinny who has that. And this is also the phase where I started to really lose myself. So I hired a personal trainer. It was a student personal trainer, so it was really cheap. And this is where I started writing down everything I was eating. I started writing down calories. I started being conscious of the energy I took in and the energy I put out. This early phase of my journey, this is where it was just restriction. There was no binging yet. That was happening because my body had not yet experienced that yet of like starvation and then holding on and then going crazy. Then it got to the point where it was actually binge restricting. So it wasn't just restricting my intake and exercising a lot. It started to get to the point where I was restricting and then later in the day I would binge. Restricting, later in the day I would binge. That was the cycle I would go through. So eventually I lost 65 pounds and I was able to wear these little Lululemon outfits and just look really skinny. And, you know, I wanted to be the skinniest person in my classes. And eventually I got there, but it wasn't enough. I was starting to numb out my feelings because anxiety and depression started to set in. I was doing some really weird food behaviors. Like I would eat mustard as a snack because that had 0 calories on the nutrition label. I would freeze foods that weren't normally frozen just so I could eat slower. I was eating things out of the trash and drowning foods in soap so that I couldn't eat them anymore. I would do things like go to a restaurant and order a plain salad with just vinegar, not even vinaigrette, no oils or nothing, so that I would consume as little calories as possible when I went out to eat. I had fainting spells because I wouldn't eat all day and I would chew just a lot of gum. I ended up losing my period. I started really obsessing over health. And I thought that was just because I was trying to be healthy, but this was actually fear-based behaviors, which makes the difference. I experienced orthorexia. It's not a bad thing to want to be healthy. But my behaviors and my choices were based off of fear. They were not based off of solely treating my body with love and care. It was another way for me to control. So I was preoccupied with healthy eating. I was preoccupied with healthy living. I was doing things like veganism, paleo, Whole30, juice cleanses, eating a ton of vegetables just for like volume eating, just to fill my stomach. But my deeper intention here wasn't health or to save animals. I was cutting out these things based on fear. There was another way I could control what I was consuming. So I developed a long list of bad foods. I was fixating on nutrition labels and ingredients of food. There were aisles in the grocery store I would avoid going down. I would feel so frustrated and guilty whenever I would eat foods that were considered not clean or unhealthy or what I considered off limits. There were food rules, and I would compulsively look up the menus of restaurants that we were going to go to so that I would know how many calories they were, what I would be able to eat, and all of those types of things. I felt really anxious when there was food uncertainty, like for example, if we were to go out to eat or if we were to go travel somewhere that had limited food availability, because I was worried that they would have too much calories and to figure out what I could eat. Because at this phase, I had a lot of rules as to what I could and couldn't, should or shouldn't eat. And with regards to exercise, I would exercise relentlessly, 6 to 7 times a week, 3 hours a day. Being fit, that was an identity I had took on. I was hyper focused on the numbers, calories, my weight, macros, Fitbit, points. And I would restrict myself to 1,200 calories a day or less, which then ended up having me binge later in the day. And because of all this restricting and stuff, I remember distinctly one day I was sitting on the floor with a rotisserie chicken, like a full rotisserie chicken, and I ate the entire thing in that one sitting. On this journey, I started to lose myself. I was obsessed with food and I was thinking about it all day. I had insane cravings, especially at nighttime, and I would avoid getting certain foods at the grocery store, and then at 9:30 at night, whichever grocery store was still open, I would drive there as fast as I could to get whatever food I was absolutely craving to go back home and down it. I felt empty and I never felt full. I lost my personality. I was super irritable, I was frustrated, and I was very reactive. And I would steal food from other people, like my roommates. I would literally steal food and then replace it. I would literally take pictures of what the food looked like before I ate it, and then I would eat it all, and then I would go out to the store, get the exact same thing, put it back, and make it look exactly like it was before I touched it. These behaviors were impacting way more than just myself. They were impacting my friends and my family. And I was hiding food all the time, especially foods that I wasn't allowed to have. And I would get really frustrated when people would buy certain foods that I wouldn't buy for myself because now they were in my sight. And so I would ask those people to hide those foods for me. But when I was ravenous at nighttime, like I would find them no matter where they were. I would hide things in the top cabinet all the way in the back. And whenever I was in a ravenous state, whenever it was late at night, I would find it. I would say things like I was bad or I was good or I'm going to do better tomorrow. I'm going to do better on Monday. I'm going to do better on the 1st. And this was all based on like the identity I took onto myself, like doing better, being good. Like, and if I was bad, that meant punishment. I wouldn't eat for that morning or lunch or intended not to eat all day, or that I would do excessive amounts of cardio to make up for a mistake that I had made the night before. I would do things like eating an excessive amount of gum just so that I would try not to eat as much during the day. I was isolating myself because I knew that in social environments, I couldn't necessarily control what food was available to me. There was a lot of uncertainty, and so I would just avoid going completely, especially if things were at nighttime, because at nighttime I had eaten a lot of food, and it was very obvious to me that people would be able to see my belly pooch after binging on a ton of foods. And even when I was with my friends, I wasn't really there. I wasn't really present. I wasn't really actively participating and enjoying my time with them because I was so preoccupied with food. I was so preoccupied with being good versus bad. And there were so many things that I couldn't control when I was in those environments. So I pretty much avoided going to social events and hanging out with friends. So I really missed out on nurturing my relationships. And I was really just distancing. And when I would go home from college for the summers and the winters, I would go crazy on the foods that my parents had. So I'm curious if you've ever hidden food or isolated yourself because of your binge eating behaviors. Comment down below. I would go crazy on the foods that my parents had because I wouldn't buy those things for myself when I was in college. I would completely avoid those things. So whenever I was home, I would go crazy and eat all of those foods that I wasn't allowing myself when I was at school. And I was always chasing enough. I would look in the mirror and I'd have lost 65 pounds and I wanted more. And I got to the point where I actually had a thigh gap in a picture, and I hadn't even realized that that had happened, but a member of my extended family had told me, hey, just saw this photo of you. I'm just, I'm a little concerned. And I didn't realize that there was anything wrong. Like, I just saw it as a picture. But when she pointed it out, I looked at it and I thought to myself, wow, maybe there is something wrong. A thigh gap was something that was like a validation factor of like, you've made it. Like, you have that body where like, you know that you're not fat, that you have this trophy thing, that you have gotten to this point in your weight loss journey. Phase 3 of my binge eating story was when I had the wake up call. This is the time where I got to the point where I didn't want to live life anymore, and I ended up being hospitalized. I had severe anxiety attacks so frequently, and I would even be led into the hospital at times. And then the last time I was not discharged. I actually ended up staying, and I was on suicidal watch. So for 1 week, I was in a lockdown psychiatric unit. For the next month, I was in an inpatient eating disorder unit. And then after that, I was in a hybrid program. Now, if I were to share my whole experience in that would be a completely different video, because that's kind of this huge experience in and of itself, but I'll keep it just to that for now. And if you'd like me to make a video of that experience when I was an inpatient, either in the psychiatric unit or an inpatient eating disorder unit, please feel free to let me know, and I'm more than happy to share that experience as well. So when I was hospitalized, this is when I was actually diagnosed with depression, anxiety, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. When the psych told me that I had bipolar disorder, that really threw me off, because I was like, that can't be true. But it ended up being absolutely true. I just wasn't really aware of a lot of the different things that I was doing. They were not normal. Have you ever gotten to a place where you realize that what you're doing isn't normal and it's something that you needed help with? Comment down below. When I was in the hospital, I actually started to develop a relationship with God, which I hadn't for a very long time, because when I grew up, there was a lot of religious trauma. I didn't have a good relationship with that. I was brought up in a Christian home. However, I didn't really believe in that. And so this was the first time in years that I had brought that back into my life. But this was because I was at such a deep, dark place that I needed something more than me to support me in this journey. And so that's when I started to actually bring that back into my life. Nowadays, I don't call it God, like that doesn't resonate with me, but that's all that I knew back then was capital G, God. But nowadays I reference it more as like universe and source. But those terms I didn't know back then, so didn't use them. So now we're at phase 4 of my binge eating story. So this is where I actually started to get long-term results, long-term recovery. This was very different than prior attempts. I got to the deeper root causes. In prior attempts to control my binge eating, I would do dieting, behavioral changes, mindset work, talk therapy with somebody who really didn't relate to what I was going through, and learning coping behaviors. Now, all of those things have their place and their tools, but they are not the long-term fix. And I'm curious if you're at a place where you realize that there's deeper work to do in order to get help. So I started to do root cause healing, and I learned that binge eating was just a symptom of deeper rooted traumas. I started to understand the concept that now I use with my clients all the time, which is the weed analogy. If you have a weed and there's green up at the top, if you pull just the greens, it will grow back. But if you were to pull all the way from the roots and pull out, it's not going to grow back. So that's the concept we're talking about, is if you're just addressing the behavior and the mindset and all of that sort of stuff, it's going to grow back. But what's important is that you actually get down to the deeper roots so that it doesn't. So if you're curious about how to do that, then go ahead and click down below to check out the description of my binge eating recovery program, where I will guide you as somebody who has been through it. Your hand is held all the way through in a step-by-step process where you're also surrounded by a community of women that know what you're going through, and you actually get to the end result that you've been looking for this whole time. Freedom from the shackles of food. Phase 5 of my binge eating story was returning back to me. This is where I started to feel pleasure again, not numb anymore. And this is where I started to realize myself. So much I had lost through all of those years and all of those food behaviors and all of that controlling and manipulating and shame and guilt and fear and anger and irritation and reactivity. When I was doing this healing, I was returning back to myself. I was realizing all of the parts of me that I had missed, that I got to bring back. So now I was actually enjoying what I was eating, and I was fully present with the people that were around me, and I was actually actively participating in my life. I had a healthy relationship with food, and there were no more such things as bad foods, cheat days, all of these types of things. My body was actually guiding me to be able to get me to a healthy place. Your body wants you to be healthy. It just needs to trust that you are going to provide that for it. Only when we are restricting ourselves and manipulating, creating food rules and listening to everything external to our body, that's when it's not going to be able to give you those clear signals of what it needs in order to get you to the optimal health place. So I was getting my personality back. My relationships were more healthy, and health is for my body instead of coming from fear of what my body might look like if I did XYZ. It was now from a place of love of what I can do for my body so that it can support me back. So because of everything I've been through, I decided to help others that are going through the same thing that I went through, because I know what it's like to go through it alone and to not be able to be led by somebody who understands what I'm going through, to recover so much faster than I did. On average, women spend 17 years dieting. Don't waste another year of your life not actively participating in it and feeling shame and guilt and frustration with food obsession and binge eating. It doesn't have to be this way. There is hope for you. There is a clear solution. And if you want to check down below, there is my program that you can take a look at and see how it feels for you. I always say that the magic pill to this is courage. You may feel fear, and know that you are supported on the other side of this. You're not doing this alone anymore. And if you do take that next step, even though it's scary and it takes courage, I know that so many of the times people have a fear of failure, but just know that I've got you. So remember, you're not alone. I get it. There is hope and a solution for you. And I hope to see you soon. If this video was helpful for you, it would be so helpful for me if you give it a like and subscribe. And while you wait for the next video, check out these videos here. I believe in you, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.